Good evening and welcome to the Shelburne Selectboard meeting of December 11th, 2018. I'd like to call the meeting to order. As you can tell, you have an understudy this evening chairing the meeting. So our chair is recovering from a bad cold and we wish him a speedy recovery. First item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Consider a motion to approve.
Yeah, I'd like to, if I may, add a potential item to discuss an event to recognize the installation of a new town manager and discuss what we could do for that.
Okay, why don't we insert town manager, what would we call that?
Investiture.
Investiture discussion
And decide-
as item 5A to our agenda after select board comments. Would that change? I'll consider a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Our agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is approval of the select board meeting minutes for November 27th, 2018, a copy of which is included in your packet.
All right.
Consider a motion to approve.
I have one change, or maybe there's two. On page 1, under the minutes of November 13th, the third page, or the third item, page 4,
Yeah, I saw that one too.
that was not for solar panels, that was for the rail discussion.
I think this was for solar and it should be me,
Oh, okay.
was my thought here.
All right, all
I
right.
think we talked about solar at the 13th and they just had the wrong select board member.
Okay, so just
reflected there, so I'll
put
just-
you in there.
Yep, we'll swap my name out for yours.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, I remember that.
Yep. Any other
Okay,
changes?
yeah, there was one other,
Okay.
in the same vein, on 6B, the voting should be 4-0 rather than 5-0 on the second motion.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you for that, Josh.
And that's it.
Okay. Mary, you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
So move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Our minutes are approved.
As amended, sorry.
As amended.
I should have added that.
Excellent. Next item is select board comments. Start with Josh.
Okay.
We missed
oh,
public
sorry.
comment.
Public, yes.
Getting ahead of myself here, sorry. Public comments. Any comments from the public on non-agenda items?
And there'd be Ruth.
Seeing no hands, we'll move on to the new library and town center project update. Ruth Hagerman's here. Thank you, Ruth, for...
Yeah, thank you. So there's not really that much this week. We want to kind of warn people that we're trying to get ahead of winter, so the site is packed with guys. They have 20 guys out there all the time, putting together steel and doing all the other bulldozing. They are working on weekends as well. So we encourage people to come by and see what's going on, but just watch out for them coming and going. We're hoping steel will probably be about another 3 weeks, and then we should be able to start enclosing the building. The only other thing I want to point out is that Betty Marcher took a bunch of Lee's photos and videos and has put them on a link right on the front of the town webpage.
Oh, nice.
So it's really easy to access. You just go to the town webpage and scroll down past where it says agendas, and that's the first one there. And there's some really great ones coming, and I know Lee will keep sending them out to her.
Keep
So,
coming.
all right, that's really all.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Moving on to our next agenda item, number 5, select board comments.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to do a formal welcome to Lee for his first
you.
official select board meeting as town manager, and hope there will be many more. And thanks for sticking in there.
Thank you.
We'll second that. Thank you, Lee.
Glad to be here.
I don't have anything to add.
Nothing from me either this evening. So we'll move on to our new item 5A, which is a discussion of a proposed town manager investiture
Okay.
gathering and ceremony. So I'll
Yeah.
cede the floor to Josh to talk a little bit about that.
I think with the changeover to a new town manager and given all of the events of the last year, et cetera. I think it would be a great opportunity to both welcome Lee into the job and have an opportunity for town residents to meet Lee if they haven't already. So I would suggest something not terribly formal, but unless we want to, invest in a robe and a scepter and all of that. But just, a simple, recognition and reception. And the question is, I suspect sometime in January would probably be appropriate. Venue to be determined and time to be determined, what day. And I'd really appreciate comments, or suggestions as to when would be the best time for when people would be available to attend, because I think, I think it would be nice to have sort of a celebration of the town. And as many people as, to schedule it at a time when the most people could come.
I think it's a great idea. We had a little exchange on this, just trying to figure out what makes the most sense timing-wise, and we thought maybe make it part of a regular meeting, but then I think there was something that wasn't quite as accessible about that to us, so we thought a weekend, maybe mid-afternoon, but would love any input from the folks here on timing and time of day, generally, to get the most people out, as opposed to an evening during the winter where you may not get the best turnout.
Yeah, so if anybody has anything, they can certainly let me know, or let anybody know. And certainly if anybody would like to help in the planning of that, that would be great as well. And we can go from there if everybody has agreed to that. Any thoughts
Works for me.
from anybody on timing?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Promised myself I was going to keep my notes. Then that would have disappointed people.
Yeah.
I agree with what you said about January, and I think not a town not as part of a town meeting, but a separate reception with light refreshments in a heated building. I wasn't going to suggest the Sugar House or the Old Lantern or anything like that, but if we could find a space that's heated and have a reception. As a matter of fact, I don't know whether the hall downstairs
Possibly.
might be, and we could set up some tables and have, as I said, light refreshments. And I bet you if we had any drag with the town manager, he might be able to come up with some funds for some refreshments for a reception for the town manager. So that would be my suggestion.
I'll see
A
what we
nice
can do.
central location, and put out some publicity so that folks could meet the town manager. That would be mine. And I agree with that idea.
It's great. Thanks, Dr. Metz. Okay, we will
So-
work on that, and
Yeah, and please provide any ideas anybody has. We'd be happy to hear them.
great. Thanks, Josh. Next item on our agenda is the town manager report.
Thank you.
Lee.
Just a few quick comments. We had a lovely tree lighting ceremony at the town green. Many people helped out with that. Many staff, many volunteers helped out with that. We had quite a crowd. It was a beautiful evening. Peter was there in the background, as always, making sure the tree got lit. As everyone knows, we have wrapped up the sewer line replacement work for winter. We gave strong encouragement to the contractor to wrap that up, clean things up, pave what they could, and get out of Dodge for the season. And I'm pleased that we were able to get their cooperation on that. I think everyone's ready for a break on that, and we needed to get things buttoned up before winter. Budget season is very much upon us now, and as you may know, the Select Board will have its all-day budget hearing this Thursday from 9 to 4. We'll be here in the room all day. Department heads and various committees will come before us with their presentations, and then that process will continue on right up through town meeting. And lastly, as everyone knows, we have a heavily used crosswalk by the southerly entrance where the police come and go, and we also have the main entrance to the driveway here where the fire department comes and goes, and those have been very dark. So we had Green Mountain Power install several additional streetlights. One over the north driveway to better illuminate that, 2 streetlights over this area to much better illuminate those crosswalks, so
When is
that
that happening?
they're already in place.
Oops, I didn't notice.
So it may not be something that's immediately noticeable, but I watch people come and go in the dark all the time, and it's frightening enough during the day. So we're trying to continue to upgrade the safety of those matters. The rectangular flashing beacons will eventually arrive, the Eagle Scout project. It's working slowly through its process with the state officials.
What's the location on that? Is that-
Again, that'll be the crosswalk right
At
out
Route
here
7?
between here and the parade ground,
Okay.
going across 7,
Great.
just like the ones down by the museum.
Excellent.
So little by little, making improvements.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is a update from Shelburne Rescue regarding the review of a new ambulance purchase. With us this evening, we have Rescue Chief Jacob Leopold and I believe the Deputy Chief, Assistant Chief, apologies, Devin. Lee, I don't know if you had any introductory comments or if we should just let Jacob
Just want to welcome and
steer us through.
thank Jacob and Devin for their extreme efforts for all of us on the rescue squad.
Great. It's all yours, Chief.
Great. So thank you for welcoming me. Should be a relatively quick presentation. I just wanted to start and talk about Shelburne Rescue Apparatus. As their hope is that we will be signing a contract next week, or rather Lee will be signing a contract on our behalf next week for a new ambulance for Shelburne Rescue. So Shelburne Rescue currently has 2 apparatus, Ambulance 1 and Ambulance 2. We always have 1 ambulance in service with another that we keep in reserve or that we deploy for event coverage, which is pretty standard fare for ambulance services in the district. Our Ambulance 1, which we have, which we consider our primary ambulance, is a 2015 F450 4x4 chassis with a 2014 Osage Super Warrior Type 1 box. Currently has around 37,000 miles with 100,000 engine hours. Usually you have about triple the number of the engine hours just because of the amount that we idle on scene. It's pretty common for emergency apparatus. It has standard antler stretcher mounts. I bring this up just because that's a point of upgrade that we need to address due to insurance standards. We took custody of it in July 2015. Originally, it was going to be replaced July of 2025. So we keep our ambulances for 10 years. Right now, just looked at the mileage and the amount of use that it's seen. We're projecting the replacement in July of 2022. And I'll talk about that a little later in a revision to our apparatus schedule. And there are some possible remount options. And for those who aren't familiar, a remount is when you take the box off of the truck chassis or off of the vehicle chassis and you put it on a new chassis. And so in that way you reduce some of the cost by replacing the more sort of perishable elements of the motor and the suspension while keeping the customized box. So there are remount options. We believe there are remount options with our current Ambulance 1. Our other apparatus is Ambulance 2. This is our older apparatus, which we have been deploying somewhat less frequently. It's a 2008 GMC Duramax C4500, has a 2008 Osage Super Warrior Type 3 box. Minor differences in terms of size between the Type 1 and the Type 3, but also specifically the mounting. It currently has 85,000 miles, 230,000 engine hours. It also has a standard antler stretcher mount. We took custody of that in July 2008. The original replacement was July of 2018, and now we are projecting to replace it July of 2019. The reasons for the delay on that, we're simply putting together the group to replace the ambulance because it takes quite a bit of time, about 1.5 years, to actually design and mock up one of these ambulances and then move forward. And there are also some contracting delays due to changes in dealer representation in the area, specifically Osage. We did explore possible remount options, but because the patient compartment, the box as we've titled it, is a Type 3, there's not really any smooth remount to the current chassis that are out there. And so for that reason, we're looking at a full replacement, which I think is the best choice, just because it's relatively dated. And this patient compartment is not really designed with longevity in mind, at least as we've sort of experienced it. So what we've now been working on in our proposed apparatus, I say proposed, we're pretty much set. Our committee's gone through with a number of vendors. We've gone through build processes with the 2 leading vendors in the area. There's a 2019 Ford F450 4x4 chassis, a 2019 Braun Chief XL box patient compartment. It would be upgraded, or rather it would be deployed with a Stryker power load stretcher mount, and that's one of the new, it's not an insurance requirement, but it's an insurance recommendation. We do need to have some type of new stretcher securing device, and the power load not only meets that requirement, but then also sort of reduces some of the risk of actual ambulance personnel, rescue personnel, because it's actually motorized. So it carries the weight of the patient once we're locked in. And so it's roughly a $25,000 item, but we've gotten a discount going straight to the Stryker vendor. So that's actually a huge thing for us. And we would be upgrading our ambulance one as well with some bundled purchasing that we've lined up. Right now, should we move forward, the custody would be July of 2019 with projected replacement in July 2028 with some possible remount options. One of the features that we went with Braun with, or one of the reasons why we went with Braun, was because they use a aluminum welded patient compartment, a box, so it has better crash test ratings than our current ambulance, and many of the services in the district have been moving to Braun just because it's found to be a better build quality with greater longevity. So that's sort of one of the reasons. But that also goes into sort of talking about our apparatus schedule and our thinking. Currently, what Shelburne Rescue does is we buy a new ambulance outright. This is taken from the ambulance fund, which is a town account that's supported entirely by insurance revenue or insurance billings. So there's no tax dollars that contribute to these purchases, much like most of the operations of Shelburne Rescue, though we are supported by the town, and in other ways, the day-to-day operations are supported directly from insurance billings, and that also includes a brand new ambulance every 10 years. And as you can see, we stagger such that every 5-ish years we have a new apparatus to deploy. What we're thinking of doing going forward, as we move into other types of apparatus, is actually working in an alternating schedule of remounts and full replacements, such that we would not replace the patient compartment, the box, as frequently. We would replace the chassis more frequently, actually less than 10 years. We're thinking 6 to 8 years, simply because we've noticed that we start to have a number of mechanical issues at that 70,000 to 80,000 mileage mark, which then will have an ambulance out of service. So as some of people may have seen earlier this summer, our A2 unfortunately had multiple failures when we was out providing event coverage, where it had to then be taken to a dealership. It had to be taken down to the town mechanic. So that was troublesome. And so what we're trying to do is somewhat future-proof into our apparatus schedule that, where we start to replace the vehicles before they begin to have mechanical issues, while still salvaging, or rather carrying over, the elements of the ambulance that can last longer. The goal then, by doing this, is one, eliminating the chance of having any apparatus down so that we always have 2, but then also some cost reduction elements. So just based on the ambulance prices, it's about $1 million in purchases over 40 years. If we move to a remount cycle, ideally it would be $660,000 again, and that's just from our insurance revenue, but where we can save money, we can. That's the best. And then ideally we would also have a new chassis for greater reliability every 6 to 8 years. That's pretty much what we're thinking right now. I don't know if there's any questions or comments.
Just one. Mary and I went to a session sponsored by Regional Planning on energy efficiency, and they were talking at that point about some retrofitting for police and ambulance vehicles that sort of reduce idling time, and I think that's how I was trying. And I'm wondering if that's being considered for your new. It seems like it's pretty bulletproof at this point, in regard to it doesn't really affect the efficiency. It just essentially deals with managing idling time more efficiently. And we can probably get you more information if you haven't looked into that.
I think you can
get a retrofit of most vehicles so that the vehicle doesn't idle, the engine turns off, but the vehicle is still on.
All the equipment is still available.
Like a Prius.
Okay, so it's something we could definitely look into. The ambulances right now are deployed with a bank of batteries most of the time to keep the module on for a certain amount of power. One of the things that, it's interesting, the ambulances generally come designed with a high idle feature such that when you park it on scene, it actually idles at a higher rate to provide more energy to the box, to the patient compartment, to actually power the medical devices and keep the heat up for patient needs. It seems almost the maybe the opposite goal, but I'd be happy to look at it. It's not something that I've heard deployed in our discussions.
Okay.
I'm sure that there might be something,
Yeah.
but possibly not, that you can use. I can understand how you would have to idle more.
Right. Yeah. I mean, our scene times are generally less than 20 minutes,
But
but
do you keep idling though when you're at an event, for example, like the police do?
no.
Okay.
So when we're doing event coverage during the summertime, which is mostly when events are, we don't have our ambulances on during that time frame. We actually we shut everything off. Most of the reasons why ambulances idle when they're on emergency scene is to make sure that we can move quickly if needed. And then during the more inclement weather, it's to provide a climate-controlled environment. There have been a few occasions during the summer events when it's been particularly hot and we're worried about possible heat exhaustion type situations where we have kept our ambulance idling just to have the air conditioning running. But those are fewer. They're less common. So, and we don't generally idle for any of the summertime standby events. So,
Good to know.
but I would be glad to look into that. So,
Great. Peter, are these reflected in the capital improvement plan? These asset purchases are? Okay. And that's the schedule that we just approved? Okay.
yeah, I haven't revised the capital improvement plan with Peter to show the remount replacement cycle. Right now, we're still looking at a new custody every 5 years.
Got it. Okay. So this is more informational to us at this point. Is that
Yeah.
a fair statement, or is there any action from our end other than?
Not that I'm aware of, since it's not involving expenditure of
Right.
tax money.
It's just so the public is aware
Right.
that you'll see a brand new ambulance out there.
Peter, does your insurance reimbursement, is it adequate to, I'm sorry, it's not Peter.
No, Jacob. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it adequate to fund this? Or do you have concerns about?
Not at this time. So right now, unfortunately, the insurance billings and the revenue from that do seem to have been continually capped by the Medicare and Medicaid rates, which is making things a little bit trickier. Shelburne Rescue also, we don't pursue the differential between multiple insurances. We could, it's just not something, it's not a billing practice that Rescue's ever pursued, and I don't think we intend to.
I do know
So,
that you've raised money.
yeah,
Every now and
absolutely.
then,
We-
something in the Shelburne
Yep,
News
yep.
comes.
We have our annual subscription drive,
Yeah.
which is fantastic, and we've always, welcomed that support from the town. I think for now, our revenue is sufficient. It's definitely sufficient for this, and I would say a couple more, I think, projections. But the costs are always increasing. And multiple services in the district have taken to charging fees, per capita fees. It's not something that Shelburne Rescue is really considering at this time, though. So, and that would, of course, have to be a town discussion, since we are a municipal department, and many of our partner agencies and peers are actually nonprofit organizations. They are separate independent agencies. They are not municipal departments the way Shelburne Rescue is.
Like UVM, for example, is that?
So UVM is actually a student organization. Charlotte is separate. Richmond Rescue, Essex is separate. They are 501c3s that bill the towns in which they're housed, but they are not municipal departments. Colchester Rescue is a municipal department, I do believe. So they're a bit more similar in terms of their cognizant agency. So.
Interesting.
Great.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jacob. Will this presentation be available on the town's website, or if people are interested in
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly.
looking at it, it'd be helpful, I think, just to see.
We're also, and if anyone's interested, you're welcome to reach out to me and we can sit down and talk you through. We have pages of schematics and detailed builds that we decided not to present, but Devin Major, my assistant chief,
It-
has been heading up the build and can talk for hours on
It's
end about
excellent.
this. with a great
Yeah, it sounds
deal
like
of
you've done
expertise.
a lot of diligence and work on this, so thank
So-
you. You have
culmination
Our
of
full support, I think, is fair to say.
18 months of work for Devin Maker, so huge
Wow.
thanks to him. So
Thank you.
Thanks to the team. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. And we'll see you Thursday?
absolutely, I
Yes,
think we'll
excellent.
be in the afternoon. At some
Okay,
point.
good. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Jacob and Devin also for their strategic leadership. Clearly, they've put a lot of time and effort into this approach, but just their whole spirit and approach to running the rescue squad and interaction with other agencies. It's much appreciated.
Thanks again. Next item on our agenda is a proposed ratification of the DeSautel's open space agreement.
Mr. Chairman, I think I seek guidance from the remaining members of the board, and I apologize for interrupting, but I
Did you
was the
approve this one?
chair. Yeah, I was the chair on this at the DRB. I don't think it makes any difference, but I just wanted to point it out on the
think-
record.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good disclosure. I mean, to me, it's a condition and a permit that preceded your,
Great.
right,
Great, yep.
joining the board, so I don't think there's an issue, but
thank you.
thank you. I'll defer to you. I think this
Thank you.
is a ratification stemming from a permit condition for this particular
Yes.
subdivision approval. Periodically, there are open space agreements that are entered into as part of permit conditions, and this is one that we're being asked to review and ratify. I don't know if you have any other
Yeah, very.
comments to add.
Thanks. Very briefly, it relates to a subdivision out in the corner of town, Route 116 and Pond Road. And as I understand it, as you've explained, as a part of the town's zoning approval, it required an open space agreement. In some cases, open space can be protected purely by a permit condition. In other cases, the town has chosen to execute a separate open space agreement, believing that it may give the town greater enforcement opportunities if there were problems arising on that land that was not intended to be developed or mined or excavated. So we have a fairly standard agreement before us. It's been reviewed by council. And if you're okay with it, a motion to accept that and authorize the town manager to sign that on your behalf would be the action that would be needed.
And I would just add that the development has been pretty thoroughly vetted by the Development Review Board over the course of, it's going on probably 2 years now. I've been out to the land. It's fairly beautiful. It's right across the road from the Gilmet. Is it Gilmet Farm? And it's almost in Heinsberg, part of it.
Right.
And it's a pretty piece of land, and they've worked really hard to preserve it appropriately. We concluded anyway. So it's going to be a small development. I think five
I believe so.
homes,
I think that's right.
but they're
Yeah.
clustered in a way so that it's not like big lot with a home, big lot with a home, big lot with a home, and a lot of them are hidden sort of in the woods. So I think it's great to have the agreement.
Any comments, Josh, from your end?
No, seems.
It's pretty straightforward. These are always nice extras to have when a landowner is willing to agree to this. And I think there's some, as Lee mentioned, some more permanence with these since they run with the deed. So when the property is sold, this is part of the deed that's conveyed. And we've had a couple meetings here where we've had some pretty compelling conservation opportunities. So it's nice to see this come in and presented for our approval. Tom, did you have a question or?
Is that Audie?
Yes.
No,
Okay.
I may have one later. but
Okay.
I don't know.
Thought I saw your hand go up.
No,
Well,
my hand did not go up.
Welcome. Dr. Metz.
Well, isn't that farm property at this time?
No,
But it's not, but it adjoins a farm, a working farm.
it's across the road. The working farm's on the north side of Pond Road, and this
Right.
land is on the south side. It's on a bluff. There's parts of it that are rocky, and there are parts of it that are forested.
But aren't there barns on the south side of Pond Road? Yes, on the south side, there are barns there, and I think,
I don't recall them, Dr. Metz. I've been out there a couple times. We did 2 site visits, and I don't recall. the barns
At
at all.
one point, there was distinct problems with percolation, the installation of a sewage system of some kind, because the property, the soils did not perk. I know that because we, at one point, my wife and I were considering purchasing some property out there for a home, and that was a big issue, that it wouldn't percolate for a proper sewer system. Now, I know the DRB has looked into it from some standpoints, but I wonder how much they've taken into account the suitability of that property for what's been planned.
My recollection, Dr. Metz, is that it was thoroughly vetted, but I hope for Mr. Desautel's sake that you're wrong.
And also, of course, they're not that far away from the marshes that feed Shelburne Pond. So that's another issue. I expect that's all that's been looked at, but
I think so. All the more reason to
Yeah, exactly.
to
That's
execute this
one
agreement.
piece of this to sort of help at least manage that buffer in perpetuity.
Yeah, these are typically reviewed at great length by state officials for those very issues that you raise. And as I'm sure everyone's aware, you've seen mound systems throughout the region, and part of the reason for that is the unsuitability of soils in some areas.
when we were considering it, an engineer right here in Shelburne refused to do a mound system because apparently the percolation is so poor that he felt that a mound system would have to be unbelievably complex in order to work. So I don't know, whether that pertains, but the property we were considering was pretty close.
Fair enough. Thanks, Dr. Metz. No further public comments at this point. Let's see. We'll consider a motion to accept the open space agreement between the town of Shelburne and the J. DeSautel's Revocable Living Trust dated February 13th, 2008, and authorize the town manager to sign the agreement on behalf of the town.
So moved.
So moved. It does look like we're supposed to sign it.
Yeah,
Are
there's
we
an
signing?
updated version that with a different signature page, because this would have required a notary to be present while you signed it, and it seemed much simpler and
Oh, so
more
you're gonna
common
sign it?
practice that if you're so inclined, that you could authorize me to sign it in front of the clerk
Absolutely.
in the morning and
Yep.
Sounds good.
keep it simpler.
Moved
Great.
by Josh, seconded by Mary. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The open space agreement is approved and ratified. Moving on. Next item, we're ahead of schedule here. I don't know if Lee
was
is
there.
here. I saw him
Lee
pop his head
just
in.
walked out, yeah. We might.
So,
Might go,
I mean,
somebody
running
out
go,
of
go retrieve them.
respect for the chair, we might just pause a second here since he took the time.
Can you mic toward her a little bit so we can hear her better?
Of course.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else is having trouble hearing you, but I'm not hearing you well. Thank you.
Welcome.
You don't seem to be in the building.
Okay, well,
Hiding out. I can probably text later.
two options. We
Check
could,
the men's room.
we could do that, three
I
options.
don't think she's,
You're a good man, Tom.
We could proceed, or we can jump into budget and wait until Pete and
Yeah, jump into budget.
Lee are back. Okay, let's do that. We'll skip ahead to item 10. And this item is a brief introduction of the budget overview. So we're formally kicking off our budget review this evening. And we have a full day meeting on Thursday, as Lee mentioned, with the board and each department and a number of CBCs coming in to present their FY19, FY20 budgets to the Select Board. So Lee's going to give a quick overview to tee this up for the board and the community at large. And over the next, 6 to 8 weeks, we'll be rolling up our sleeves and spending a lot of time on this item. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Some of this will look somewhat familiar. I'm grateful to Joe, former manager, for the template that we borrowed and modified for this evening's presentation. And again, great thanks to Peter Frankenberg, who's done enormous work to date on pulling a lot of information together that our department heads have produced. So this is intended as just a real broad brush overview for everyone, and then we'll launch in, as you said, to greater detail over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So this is just a general quick overview of the budget process. We worked on the capital plan. Staff have worked on their budget presentations. You held a hearing and approved capital improvement plan and budget. We'll kick this off tonight and again on all day Thursday and then the following Tuesday. Continue our discussions through January, eventually warn a budget for town meeting. We'll have town meeting in March as usual, and then the budget would become effective on July 1. So a quick overview where general fund revenues come from. As typical, the predominant source is property taxes, but we do have some other sources of revenues, and we're always seeking more of those as well. Some of the key challenges next year, this will be the last year where we now transfer all the cell tower revenue to the water department, so the town itself does not receive that any longer. That's a process that's been in place for several years now. Police department is proposing some upgrades to their equipment and to the security systems in this building, which have not been functioning as well as they should. The equipment part of it in particular, although the police chief will give an overview, one piece they're looking for that I think is really important is a greater array of non-lethal alternatives to dealing with challenging persons. Stormwater, as we know, we did not yet create that utility, so there'll be a push in the budget to do some required stormwater upgrades for next year on the tax bill. As we all know, debt service will rise next year. Will be the first year of debt service on the town center library project, among other things. We have some other capital projects, either that have been already funded and in the works or hopeful.
Plus, sorry, Lee, the plus 96, is that the incremental amount of debt service over the current fiscal year?
Total debt payments.
Total debt payments
For the
for the bond. Okay.
And they'll increase over time, right?
That steps up a little bit.
This
And then
year
goes
and
down.
next, and then it
Yeah.
goes back down.
Great.
Yes. As always, personnel and staffing issues remain. I'm not suggesting there are any specific key challenges right now, but we're still working to figure out how to restaff the other position in the town manager's office. We'll have some thoughts and ideas on that through the next month or two. So looking at long-term debt, Mary, in particular answer to your question, so
Here we go.
next year and the year after are somewhat tougher on the debt side, and then it drops off. Again, we'll go into this in much more depth over the next few meetings. We'll review various requests from our various CBCs, and you'll hear about those on Thursday. And then just clarifying for everyone next steps, again, Thursday, our all-day special meeting. We will meet again next Tuesday, avoiding the Christmas Day Tuesday, to continue discussing the budget. By the end of the year, by charter, I have to deliver a full-fledged budget to you, and then we'll continue on through the next few months up through town meeting again. So that's real quick, high-level overview of the process and some of the key elements we'll be facing. And we'll continue tonight, and we'll see you Thursday as well.
Any questions, comments from the board? I know we're going to spend a lot of hours together on Thursday talking
Yes.
about this, so.
Thank you for your
but we're happy
commitment.
Get to go through
I'm happy
this
to get a
before
preview.
then.
Agreed, yeah. We have our pretty
Homework.
binders in front of
Yes,
us
your
and some
nighttime
homework to do
reading.
over the course of the next couple nights.
So I hope
Thank you.
that's a helpful, brief overview.
It's a nice overview of the timing and process. So thank you. Any comments from the public? Dr. Metz, do you mind grabbing the mic for us? Sorry
You can
to
just
make you
grab
get
it
up,
and
but
sit
just
down
for
if you
our
like.
friends at home who are streaming.
Right.
Lee, could you go back a couple of slides where you showed the main categories? I think it's closer to the end than that. You identified some main categories. Yeah, maybe that one. What I don't see, and maybe it's just because it's under something else, but I don't see the legal expenses. Does that have a separate category there? And if it doesn't, should it? And as you're aware, there's been some significant controversy about that.
Yes.
And probably, I think some people, including myself, would feel a lot better if that were defined carefully, thoughtfully, and pretty thoroughly, so that there'd be no loopholes in this coming fiscal year. So is that a separate category, or is it under one of those that you have there? Legal expenses?
Well, this particular slide was intended to just highlight what we anticipate, some topics that the various committees will come in with. The legal budget is proposed to be kept level with this year for the next fiscal year, and we've certainly worked very hard to keep legal expenses down over the last 6 to 7 months, and I think we'll certainly work together to continue to doing that. I know one of the topics the Select Board and I will be talking about is a clearer process for how we trigger use of legal counsel to try to keep those costs in check. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on the budget overview? Anybody? No? Okay.
Good.
Well, thanks, Lee. That's a nice overview. A lot more to come. We'll jump in with gusto on Thursday. Okay.
We have to find Lee again.
Is Lee keeps disappearing from us here, I think. Thank you, Pete. Okay, so going back to item 9, this is a continued discussion of the public hearing of the proposed conflict of interest ordinance, and I will formally reopen the public hearing at this point. And open it, I guess. We closed it and we're opening
This is
a subsequent
officially
hearing. This is the formal public hearing. Let's see. Here we go. Mike is here. Great.
Pete is here, Diana.
Okay, we have our Ethics Committee Chair, we have Mike here as well. Thank you all for attending, and I guess first, just to set this table a little bit here, this is a body of work that has been in process for, help me out here, Mr. Chair,
A year?
at least a year. A lot of hours invested by our Ethics Committee and a lot of great thought and input from residents and folks in town. So it's exciting to be at this point where we have the public hearing, we're having an opportunity to discuss the draft. As a board, we've made several modifications to various drafts, so this has been in our court for a number of months at this point. So here we are. We have a draft in front of us that was included in the package. This is the draft that we approved as a board on the 13th to be warned for public hearing. I will, unless you have any comments or thoughts, I will open it up to the board initially for for thoughts. I had one item I did want to make the board aware of and the folks in attendance. Tom Little had reached out to me with a proposed edit. I don't know if you have seen this or not, but he recognized that this might be an 11th hour change. So I spoke to Lee about this briefly before we opened up tonight, and I believe the charter takes a pretty strict approach to changes in real time once a ordinance has been warned for public hearing. So Tom had made a very modest suggestion. I can point the board to the change. It's in Article 11, Section, let's see, 3C, and it was an addition meant to
Article 11,
C3
C3?
or
C3, you mean?
C3.
Yeah.
Or not 3C.
C.
Well, it would be Article 11, C, 3C, honestly.
Article 11, C,
I see what you're saying.
C-
Paragraph C.
C3, C. Upon finding a reasonable likelihood, the clerk shall, Tom proposed, provide a copy of the complaint to the respondent, which he sort of identified as a gap. You know, do we have the ability to provide the respondent with a copy of the complaint? It seemed like a modest change to me, so I said I'm happy to take it to the board. I didn't quite appreciate the nuance of the charter, since in my former life as the Planning Commission chair, there's a little more latitude when you warn a public hearing and make certain changes that aren't quite as substantive as others. So in any event, Tom recognized that this might create some ripples, so his suggestion was maybe we just pick that up in the Ethics Committee Rules of Procedure, which I'm comfortable with. Would welcome your thoughts on this. I'm happy to share Tom's markup. I wasn't sure if he did.
Can I interrupt and say, I think we talked about this very thing the last time we had a hearing, because it was a concern of
If I
mine.
recall, we did,
Yeah.
and I think at that time we said, well, that's something that could be taken care of in the rules. There are, Tom and I think Tom mentioned this to me, by the way.
Okay, good.
And as he and I are going through developing the new rules of procedure under the ordinance, I'm finding similar things that are not specified in the ordinance, but I consider to be consistent with the ordinance. And I happen to have a history of working with rules committees and who are interested in implementing rules for Superior Court and the Supreme Court that are consistent with statute. And I'm pretty comfortable that this particular matter that Tom raised can be handled in the rules. It's consistent with the ordinance. And I'm just letting you know right now, I've identified 3 or 4 other things that are not specified in the ordinance, but are consistent with the ordinance. And when we put out our proposed rules for comment, members of the public and members of the select board might say, no, you can't do that. You'll have to amend the ordinance. But I doubt that. I think they're totally consistent. So I would say, rather than put this off another 6 months or a year, or even 1 month, I'd be happy to address it in the rules.
Okay, that's helpful. Do you, Mr. Chair, are you at the point where you're comfortable sharing the other changes, or should we just sit tight until the committee publishes the proposed changes to the rules? I guess from my perspective, I'm okay with this, but I do have concerns about shifting things into the rules of procedure that may not quite be procedural, that's all. And I want, importantly, I want the public to be able to, let me just finish.
And if we have to amend the ordinance because of this, so be it. But
I'm not suggesting that, I'm just saying the most important thing to me is that the public sees the document and understands the ordinance, right?
Okay.
And that if things need to be read in parallel,
Okay, no
we're
one
pretty
on,
good at that, but I just don't know if that is an expectation that we can put on most people who are reading this and aren't
Okay.
as fluent in it as this group is, that's all.
So I'll just give you two examples. The ordinance says, and I don't specifically, the ordinance says that in a confidential preliminary investigation, we can interview the respondent. That's new. The ordinance does not specifically say that we can provide a copy of the confidential complaint to the respondent. But how can we interview the respondent if the respondent doesn't have the complaint in front of him or her?
Yeah, and I think that's the gap that Tom,
That's what you said.
with a fresh set of eyes, recognized.
Well, this is right, but this is a
Right.
little different.
I
I
mean,
don't know if Tom mentioned to the complaint to the respondent, but if that's it, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So.
That's the challenging case
So,
here.
you know, I think in the rules, we could say, well, we're in the in the preliminary investigation, we can interview the respondent, give the respondent a copy of the complaint, and tell the respondent cannot share it with anyone. Seems to me that can be done by rule.
That seems like a procedure.
That's procedure. Another example is let's say you didn't interview the respondent, and this is a problem with the current rules too. If it's a problem, I don't think it's a problem, but if probable cause is, if reasonable likelihood is not found, you have to notify the respondent that reasonable likelihood was not found. That's in the ordinance.
Notify the complainant
The
And the
complainant
respondent.
and the
and the
respondent.
respondent.
That's in the ordinance somewhere. I don't have it in front of me.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Right?
It's in that same section, 3B.
So again, and this even came up in the past. You've got to notify the respondent who has not even has no idea that a complaint had ever been filed, that the committee met, determined no reasonable likelihood, notify respondent, no reasonable likelihood was found, and the respondent's going to say no reasonable likelihood that what was found. And so you've got to give the respondent a copy of the complaint when notifying the respondent that it was not, nothing was found.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
Of
sort of
course.
obvious due process, right? That should be.
Right. So to me, that could be dealt with by rule because the ordinance says you notify the respondent. It doesn't specifically say and provide a copy of the complaint. And unless I'm mistaken, when this came up in the past, we did give the respondent a copy of the complaint.
No, they were able to come in and read it, but they didn't take a copy.
Okay. So we can make the rules that they could read a copy of the complaint. But that to me, it's not specifically authorized by the ordinance, but we'll put it in the rules. So there are
Yeah, I agree.
things like that. That's all. So I think Tom's issue and these other things, we can deal with by rule.
Okay.
And if the select board has any concerns that our rules going beyond the ordinance, we can address that, but I doubt it.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments from the board? Any thoughts?
No, I think we've been pretty thorough in going through this multiple times, and I certainly want to commend and thank the committee for their thoroughness and their patience on this.
Mary?
Yeah, Roger that. I think that what we had to say made a lot of sense in terms of creating rules. I think this is fairly well vetted, the ordinance, and I'm ready to act. unless there's more to be said.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, given this has been a very collaborative project in my experience, I think we had two liaisons who worked very closely with you and your team, and I think the work product's strong, and I think it's an improvement. It's streamlined, so it's a change. I wonder, I know we've talked about next steps and sort of the 2.0 projects that I know your committee is going to undertake as we get into the new year here, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on just communicating this, right, for the benefit of the public here. Is there any messaging, or should we, other than maybe a front porch forum post, maybe something just to let the community know that we have a new ordinance in place, not that people are going to stop doing what they're doing in mid-December and pick it up and read it, but
Yes, the committee has started to talk about this. We met last week, and we're going to continue to talk. Just to echo some of the comments before, I want to thank the members of our committee, and in particular the ones who are here, Pete Gadju, Mike Ashew, and our clerk, Diana Vachon, for all the work that they have put into this. I want to thank the members of the public, many of whom are here tonight, Linda Reel and Tom Tompkins and Sarah Tompkins, who have attended many of our meetings and provided us with very valuable input. And I want to thank the Select Board liaisons, Mary Kehoe and Jamie Hines, for their incredible work to make this a better product and a collaborative effort. So thank you. We have already talked about a little bit about how we're going to communicate all of this. Mike Ashew has stepped up to take the lead on communicating it probably through our town report. Our new town manager is encouraging us all to make the town report something that someone might want to read. And we're going to do our part to make it interesting. And congratulations for you for doing that. We're also need to work on developing educational programs, and we want to work with the select board and the town manager on how to best do that. I think we can do better than what we did in the past, and I don't know whether whether we want to have a training program for CBC chairs themselves, and then for other participants, or how best to do that. But we'll be working with you and our committee on that. And Mike Ashew, who's our educator at UVM, has said he would step up and take the lead on that as well. We have to develop rules pretty soon. And as you know, you can tell we've already started with that, but and Tom and I have had some communications, but the whole committee has not had an opportunity to dig into that yet. So we've got a bunch of work once this ordinance becomes effective. So one of my questions is, I don't know if it says it right now or is it's by town charter, what is the effective date of the ordinance if you do adopt it tonight?
It becomes effective immediately upon adoption.
Okay, excellent. It says it right there. Okay, even better. Okay.
Yeah, the charter's very clear on
you
that.
anticipated that.
Oh, good, excellent. Well, that's why we have select board chairs and town managers to put the finishing touches on.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the entire board. Mike and Pete, I don't know if you would like to say anything. Obviously, huge thanks on behalf of the board, and really look forward to the next body of work on this. I think the training and education is the most important piece that we can do. This is nice. This is an improvement, but let's hope that we don't have to test this. Let's hope that we can just park this and make it available, but the real work really should be educational and helping public officials understand their obligations and letting residents ask questions, right? Just having some type of process to diffuse situations before they really become problematic. So, thank you.
So I would move to close the hearing at this time, Mr. Chair, and move to adopt the ordinance as drafted.
Yeah, I'd be happy to second that.
Excellent. All in favor as moved?
Aye?
Aye. We have a new
Okay.
ordinance.
Congratulations
everybody.
to everyone. Yes, indeed.
Okay. Wow.
Well done.
Done.
Okay. Next item is number 12, and we are ahead of schedule.
Oh, no, I think it's 11.
Oh, sorry, 11. Our Select Board Rules of Procedure, which is a topic that we grappled with earlier this year. This board has had a chance, I think, we spent maybe a couple meetings, right? 2 or 3?
More. I went back. I think there were actually 4 times it came up.
Okay, so we've discussed this several times. The current board came together, acknowledged that perhaps the rules of procedure needed a little bit of work, or at least revisiting. Included in the packet, we have I think a markup of where we last left off with this in early April.
I think that's the
Yes.
last one. It was your
There were-
markup.
There were
Oh,
2
really?
versions in your packet. There were several copies on the table of the existing rules and the markup copy from April.
Right. So my colleague on the end, Dr. Dean, has invested a lot of time in this and has suggested that we should pick it back up and at least continue the discussion and see if there's some consensus or alignment on spending some more time and perhaps making some additional edits to the rules of procedure. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, I think as the chair has said, this was brought up at our inaugural meeting where we needed to adopt the rules, and so there were considerations of how to do that. In the same way, the charter gives the select board certain directions and guidance, but the select board has to create a set of rules, and that's in the current. The rules that were existing at that time, it needs to be done at that inaugural meeting. And so even though we reviewed the changes, the decision was we would do minor modifications to the existing rules and continue our discussion. And some of the things that were considered is, one, to try to make the rules more consistent with the VLCT model rules was one. To clarify the communication procedures amongst the committee, the town staff, and the public. There were some other things about committees, and in reality, because of that discussion in March and April, we actually have been following a number of the things that are in the, and I think it was discussed at that point, we sort of, without having them actually approve, we have in some way been following a number of them. Certainly the committee procedure thing was in here, and I'm not even sure it needs to be in here now that we've created a whole other part. So there are parts and pieces of this that we have been operating on. I think there are still some good things that sort of better define roles and procedures for the board. And so I think somehow it, in the wash of other things, it sort of got left behind. But I think it's probably worthwhile to bring it up and probably do another draft based on the things that we know that have already happened, and maybe streamline it a little bit, and take another go at it. So everybody's okay. I don't think there's any way we would act on anything today.
No, I agree. I mean, I think our goal tonight should be just to check the temperature of the board members sitting here tonight to get a gauge of, does it make sense to, are folks interested? This is clearly one where we'd want the full board to participate and weigh in on this. Before I speak, Mary, would you
This is,
care to
yeah,
comment?
thank you. The draft dated 4/18, I think, is my markup. It's a markup I did on 4/11, and I, distributed it, I'm sure, to everybody. It is right now a nasty mess, really. And it is complicated, but I would say, Lee, since this discussion predated you, it is a function of lengthy discussion. It's born out of a perceived need to have more thorough rules of procedure. I like your comment to keep it simple, but I think there was a need among members of the board and the town to have clearer rules, and I think, and this I think came from Josh, a need to have codification of methods for achieving and maintaining transparency.
Yes.
I would say that the first thing we need to do is come up with a policy or procedure for how to handle legal services and standardize that. There was an effort to have that in this particular rule, and I'm not sure if that's really the right way to roll with it. So it'd be my recommendation. I agree that we can't do this without our other two members here. It would also be my recommendation that we start with that discussion about how to budget for and communicate or set channels of communication for with the town attorney. Because I think that's a pretty, there's overlap there. That's an independent problem by itself, but there was an effort to address it in this rule as well. So,
So do you think that would remain part of this, or would be a
I
separate
think it's up for
entity?
discussion, but I think it's a discussion we need to have that's really more than just a discussion about a rule, I think. I don't know if that's shared by all, but, I would say, having just finally adopted the EC ordinance, that I don't look forward to delving back into editing a fairly lengthy document and coming to terms on it. It's taking, and because our time is so precious, I don't look forward to it. It's hard work, having, going through all the drafts and the meetings that we had on the
Right.
EC ordinance, and still coming up, on next review, finding something that you left out. It really is a difficult process.
Well, this is, I think, the fifth draft. I went back and looked at how many I had. But I'd be willing to essentially sort of evaluate, look at your comments, and Jamie, if you wanted to send any, and just put it into a better, into a, as you say, an easier form that we can go from. That doesn't mean it's not any more than another draft, but at least it's easier.
I mean, my view on this, and I may be an outlier, we don't have two of our members here, is that I think this was time well spent for the new board in a lot of ways. I don't know if it's necessary at this point. I think a lot of this was reactionary. There was a bit of a backlash, clearly, without, right? I mean, there was some value in at least putting this on paper for all of us, I think. I think the track record so far, as you said earlier, is we've implemented and embodied a lot of these practices already without having to put it on paper, which is a good thing in my opinion, right? We don't.
Yep.
It's nice to have these, but I don't know if it's a priority. I don't know if we want to spend a lot of time doing this when, to me, I think we're going in the right direction. There may be a few things in here. You mentioned legal services. There are a couple things that I noticed that we haven't quite surfaced. For example, our email addresses, right? When we have Public Records Act
Right.
requests, we have things that just are best practices, but that don't really need to live in the rules of procedure. So I think there's somewhere in between this. There are some things we can pull out of here and just commit to practicing without spending a lot of time turning it into formal rules that may have some marginal benefit. They may make us feel good, but I just don't know if
I'm not
it's
sure.
the best use of our time. That's just my
Right.
opinion, and we have two members who aren't here, but
But I'm not sure I think those things are fairly straightforward, and it may be just worthwhile just trying to take another shot at looking at it. I going through this before, there are, the number of things that are, that have, other than haven't been have already been mentioned. I don't think there's a whole lot of things that will take a lot of discussion. But even though we may be following those procedures, I don't see any downside in codifying it in the written document.
okay. We're not going to solve it tonight,
No.
which we can acknowledge, which is fine. Dr. Metz?
So where can members of the public see the most current draft and understand or try to understand the rules that you're now operating under and those that you're proposing to operate under? Where can we
Yep. So-
do that so we can understand?
So the current rules are on the website. If you go to the Selectboard page with our pretty
They're
pictures.
on the town website.
They are.
Under rules.
Yes, under the,
Under
Go to the
on the
select
go to the
and then-
Select
Select
Board.
Board
Yes. The
Then we can-
proposal
Yeah.
is,
The proposed rules.
should be in the
April
annotated
draft.
agenda.
Right, so there's a link to that in the agenda that's on the website for tonight's meeting.
And we can also put the
Or I can give you a copy
rules,
as well.
which
It's not a bad idea. to
a lot
include it.
include that so people can see, because some of those things that were in here were added to this, and I think the format changed to match this a little bit.
Thank you, sir.
Any other public comments? Tom?
Tom Zanatti, not having read these current or proposed rules, it seems to make sense to me that you guys are functioning well, given the current construct of the Select Board. And I think one of the advantages of eventually getting to a concrete set of rules is that can guide the practice of any future configuration of the board. And I know that this discussion comes about in part as a result of concerns from the past, but perhaps it needs to be backburnered to some extent, and I appreciate you guys are really stressed for time, and particularly this time of year. But I think in the long run, it probably would benefit the town to have a set of rules of procedure that can guide practice into the future when you guys are perhaps not part of the Select Board.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I don't disagree. I mean, these aren't forever jobs. that we hold here. So we certainly recognize the transient nature of our service here, and I'm open to continuing the conversation. I would welcome the input of the other board members. I get the sense we don't quite have consensus, but
No, I don't think we need.
I think I think there's value in discussing it. I have concerns about, is this the best use of our time right now? That's all. Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of email, and a lot of the emails are about get your priorities right. So this is one that nobody emails Jamie and says, how come you're not working on the rules of procedure?
All right.
That's all. So that's my calculus, which is very simple.
Right, and my thinking on this is, on our last meeting, we had a whole list of priorities. And so all I was trying to do is say, okay, let's add at least one thing that's on the priority list to the discussion so we at least can make some progress. Because my experience is you can have a nice priority list, but if you're only dealing with what's critical to do at the time, then you never make it down to the end of the priority list. So
I'd like to add, though, and I know this might sound a little contrarian, I apologize, but this goes along with what you were saying, Jamie, and also you, Mr. Zanotti. One thing to think about, and this is I think where you're coming from a little bit, Lee, is when you make a set of rules that are driven by circumstance, situational circumstance, then you're really kind of tying the hands of a future set of people. So I think there's an argument that the rules should be fairly general and not too specific, more as a template rather than a vice. So the one exception to that, in my opinion, is how we deal with attorney's fees. So I guess I would concur with Jamie to back burner it, but I also think we need to streamline it. I agree. It's really a pretty thick document. And so if we can figure out a way to do that, that would probably be best for now and in the future.
Great. So we'll pick it back up. Thank you for bringing it back to the forefront, and we'll look for this on a future agenda if the chair decides to put it on. Moving on to our next item is reviewing and confirming the town manager goals and objectives, and this is a bit upside down in some ways because the next item is the town manager contract, which we're going to be asked to ratify this evening. The goals and objectives are a discussion which we initiated with our new town manager. The board felt strongly that we should tighten up and formalize goals and objectives for the chief executive of the municipality. So Jerry and Lee have spent a large amount of time working on the document that's included in our packet. The board's had a chance to weigh in somewhat informally on just ideas, and some drafts have been shared amongst the group over the course of the past 4 weeks or so. So I think this evening, we really wanted to just present it to the board, allow the public a chance to weigh in on the current draft. Again, this really has been a project of Lee and Jerry for the most part. So we have a chance tonight to at least provide some input. We've all had a chance to review it, hopefully. We don't have our full board here again, so I think the way we structured the contract is that the goals and objectives, we acknowledge that this might not quite be ready when the contract is ready. So we incorporated some language that allowed us to insert this as an addendum over the course of a couple months. I can't recall if we said 2 months or what it was, but we
all agreed
we planned accordingly, knowing that we wanted to get this right. We wanted to get community input. And this evening is the first chance for us to react to this in some ways. And I think we'll pick it up at a future meeting and ratify it and formally incorporate it in the contract. So with that, I'll stop talking and turn it over to the board.
And again, there were some copies on the table, and it was linked to the agenda on the website as well, if anyone was interested in seeing that.
So just at a high level, since you may not have had a chance to look at it, we structured, 6 goals, one of which was stormwater, went through the top-level goal and objectives. The second goal was personnel and organizational development. The third is responsiveness. Fourth is prioritization. Fifth is public outreach. The sixth is development initiatives. And that was the list that Jerry and Lee had sketched together. So any thoughts, Josh or Mary? Reactions?
Josh?
I just would like Lee's feedback. Is it seems pretty robust.
Robust is a good word for it. I think they're all important topics for the board, for me, for the community. My only concern, as I noted in my comments, was that as we work on other priorities and churn through our regular work plan, that we realize that, and we get to a year out and do an evaluation, that these are not the only things that the manager has to work on or the board has to work on.
Right.
So they're all important. The primary input I had into the chair's original list was adjusting some of the timeframes to try to not, we can't do everything in the next 3 months.
Yesterday.
Much as we all like to try to do that. So my only concern, again, was just making sure that as we review this, we realize these are not the only things the board and I and the community have to work on. But they're all important topics. They're all fundamental to the good operation of the town.
But given your sense in, what you've been doing, since you certainly have been in the trenches, you feel that it is, what we've got here is potentially doable by the...
Potentially. I'll do my best.
Okay, well, I mean...
But also keep everyone informed as...
There's a difference
things
between,
flex.
like someone saying, oh, yeah, that would be nice, and I think we have to have the recognition, as you said, that there's a lot of things that come up. But certainly there's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah. Some of these are perhaps, at least at the outset, more process-oriented than necessarily accomplishment-oriented.
Right.
For example, development or economic initiatives. Those may be important to get us on track and launch, but fortunately, there's nothing in here that says all of these have to be actually achieved. The stormwater, yes, we have some goals and timelines to actually accomplish that. Some of these are more just make sure we keep these moving forward and that there's a clear timeline and a deliverable that at least I'm set to come back with you with a plan or a strategy.
Well, and I think that's the really benefit of this is there is that time framework that allows us, and coming back and saying, well, this date maybe need to be extended for 2 weeks, a month, but at least it provides that framework that of how things are going to get done.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, some of them are conceptual in some ways. So I think the idea here is just to make sure that you have the time to be strategic and think about these things, right? Because that is some of the most important time that you'll spend on behalf of the town is making sure that in addition to everything else that's going on in your office, the emails, the walk-ins, the staff, that you actually have a little bit of thinking time and can help formulate the strategy for things like economic development and energy conservation, which we're going to hear a lot about this as we get into the town plan, but I think having this on paper will help us achieve some of those goals a little bit more quickly maybe than we have in the past.
Agreed.
And this is not an exhaustive list either, I'm afraid to say, I imagine.
Yeah.
Could be an exhausting list.
It doesn't handle all of the
Personally,
priorities.
I didn't have a hand in drafting this per se. Personally, I would have liked to have seen a few more specific things in this plan, but I know these are just goals and objectives. so it's okay. But I would have liked to have seen something having to do with the synthesis of all of the plans that are on the website for road and path and pedestrian safety. I think that's a fairly big issue with a bunch of people who really are looking forward to having that be synthesized. So, but I think we have members of the committee here, and I know they're working hard. Unfortunately, they meet next Tuesday, next week, a week from tonight. So at the same time we are for their next meeting. But I really am looking forward to having that process conclude, because I think it is something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end if we all work hard for it. So.
Well, certainly this is a work in progress, and if that's an important issue for the board, we can, the
Yay.
board can discuss how that fits into this. So I don't think this is
good.
cast in stone
No,
as
this is
of
definitely
tonight.
not. This is a draft for initial consideration and
Oh,
reaction.
really? I thought it was
so
an action item.
no. That's
No.
not my
No,
understanding.
it
It is,
Is it?
yeah, it is.
Doesn't have to be if it's not,
I mean,
not good timing for it.
I think we're best served by continuing to put some thought into this and allow.
It's a living document.
Yeah, right. I mean, we don't have to incorporate it formally for a couple months. I can check, but
Yeah,
I
it's
know we
not-
had a little bit of time to get this right. So, and stew on it. So I think it's worth us being a little deliberate
Great.
with this and allowing additional ideas to come in. And maybe take some things off, right? Like, there's still time to edit this and make sure that
I think we all
it
want
works
to
for
get it
you.
right.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll get it to a good point, and to allow the public to spend a little time with it, and maybe there are some ideas and things that haven't been identified yet.
I'd also like to hear from Lee what his thoughts are on staffing and personnel at some point. I don't know if now's the time. I think not, because we're not all here.
I will
We're going
certainly
to
have
talk
some thoughts
Thursday
on that.
on that, I
Yeah,
assume. There'll
yeah.
be some discussion.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Any comments from the public? I don't know if people have had a chance to look at this, but Jane?
Jane Zanotti, and I lead up the pedestrian safety group. So I guess that was, some of what you've talked about was one of my concerns, which in reading through this, some of it seemed very project-oriented and specific accomplishment, things that needed to be accomplished, and other things just seemed more general, as I think Lee, you said, kind of more process kinds of things. So that was a little confusing to me about what the document is really asking of you, which is a tremendous amount. Which brought, my interest, like where does traffic safety and pedestrian safety fall in this? It's not mentioned, and yet there are some other specific projects that are. I think I understand, but that is just a question as this move forward. Like, what is really the purpose? What is this document doing? Is it saying that certain things have to be accomplished, or is it more general?
Yeah, it's a good comment. I don't have a great answer. I think it's a little bit of both. In
It's a
some ways,
yardstick.
right? I think there are some process issues here, and I think this reflects some of the input from our own process with Lee, the conversations we've had, and I think we do have to think about how this kind of coordinates with our own priorities and the board's work plan, so to speak. So I know Jerry's put a lot of thought into this, but maybe the rest of the board will have a
Yeah.
chance to sort of
Yeah.
make sure
And
that things sync up, and just because certain projects are mentioned doesn't mean that the other projects aren't necessarily as important, in my opinion, but I could see how that might be perceived that way.
Right,
If
gives
we're
that
talking about
impression.
stormwater, and
Yeah.
that's not the only priority, clearly, but
There's
a
so
fair
many that
point.
come to
Yeah.
mind. We can start rattling them off.
Just look
We got that
back at
list
the
from last
priority
week.
list.
right, we have to be careful about the priority creep with this a little bit, and making sure that it's manageable and that it's realistic and everything else that needs to happen with good performance goals. Okay. Any other comments? We'll keep working on this, Susan.
Doesn't stormwater have Susan McClellan, doesn't stormwater have a definite date that it needs to be
Yeah,
done by?
And that's in here.
Okay, so that has to obviously be higher on the priority list.
Yes. Yes. So you'll recall that we decided to push that date out to 2020 for the effective date of the new utility. That date could always change, but you're right. I mean, there were some that had hard dates and others that maybe should have hard dates that should be included. So, good point. Okay. More work to do on that. Thanks for the input. And our next item is related, as I mentioned, and it's the formal ratification of Lee Crone's agreement, which is in your packet. Hopefully, folks have had a chance to look at this. We've put some good time into this. Lee, I don't know if you want to say anything. Hopefully, the board feels good about this. I hope Lee feels good about this. I think it's fair to say that this was a very collaborative effort on our part, and I think on behalf of the town, I think we landed in a good place all around. So,
And I very much appreciate that and look forward to continued service.
Josh, Mary, any thoughts on the contract before we consider a motion to approve it? I do need you to sign this, though.
Yeah, I do have the original here,
Yeah.
Mary. Thanks to Peter.
Why don't we
I
have?
don't know.
We could still approve it. Okay.
So do we have to take a motion to ratify?
We will. So again, I won't get into the specific terms, but it is a 3-year agreement. I think that's important to mention. The rest of the detail is publicly available, of course, and residents are welcome to review the contract. And thank you. It's official. We have Mary's signature. 5 board members have now signed this. I can attest to that, and I will consider a motion to approve the town manager employment agreement between the town of Shelburne and Lee Crone, dated November 30th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank
It's
you.
Motion
official.
carried.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Exciting stuff. Transition from interim to permanent
Reality.
reality. Here we go.
Here we go.
Welcome.
Indeed.
You sure you want to do this?
We're all good to go.
Too late.
And we're going to finish early.
Right.
We had a thing going, I said we weren't gonna get done till after 9, he said it was gonna be 9 o'clock.
I was optimistic.
Pretty good on keeping it on schedule, so
Yeah.
ahead of schedule. We had a light agenda in all fairness. So anything else before we consider a motion to adjourn?
No.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
So nice.